Hello and welcome to episode 6 of MMM Sisters Stories podcast. Today, Sister Mary Doonan talks about her work in Malawi and her life as an MMM sister. We hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you for listening.
Okay, my name is Mary Doonan. I'm a local woman, 5 miles out the road. I was born here in the hospital. So I've known MMM all my life. I came to MMM in 1970, straight after my leaving cert. But I'd known the sisters for a number of years because they were in school when I was at school. And I worked in the hospital twice during the summer. And I loved it. And I wanted to do medical work. As I said, I came in 1970. Following religious formation for 3-4 years, I started my training in the hospital here and in Dublin in college. I trained as a medical laboratory scientist and got to specialise in tropical medicine and loved every minute of it. Had a ball around here for 5 years. In 1979, I was told I was going to Malawi. And I said, where is that? Had to get a map out and find out. But I was lucky there was Julie McLaughlin, a few of the sisters were home on leave. And I found out a lot more about Malawi. I found out why I was wanted in Malawi. They needed a lab tech for the hospital. It was a 200-bed hospital and a nurse training school. Although it wasn't the regional hospital, it worked as the regional hospital because government were all the time, and a lot of the public health work, which I would have been involved in, it came through the hospital. So it was a busy place. I loved it. I was asked, as well as doing the laboratory and training the laboratory technicians and helping in other hospitals at times to oversee laboratories, I was asked, would I do some teaching in the School of Nursing? And I suddenly found myself thinking, yes, Lord, you have a very strange sense of humour, because one of my reasons for joining MMM was I didn't want to teach. And here I was landed down in the nursing school teaching microbiology. I love the teaching. I hated correcting the copybooks. Anyhow, unfortunately, mid-80s, 1985, 1986, we started seeing patients come in with very unusual presentations, particularly some of the pregnant women, some of the babies and stuff, and we weren't sure what we were seeing. It turned out it was the beginning of the HIV/AIDS epidemic in Malawi. And we became very involved. I became involved with the government in it as well, setting up programs for education and setting up screening services. At the time, none of the blood was screened for blood transfusion in Malawi, so we had to get that set up. We acted as the regional hospital for screening blood and for testing patients, etc. So it was a busy time. It was a sad time as well, because we've now forgotten probably that at that stage, there was no treatment for HIV. It was a death sentence for very young people. Very often a young mother or a young father. We would see it very much in the maternity hospital when the women would need blood and you'd get the husband to come or somebody. You might check 4 or 5 and they were all HIV positive. It was it was heartbreaking. It was terrifying. At that time, the bishop approached me and asked would I go with Nico, the wife of one of the doctors, who was a psychologist, and we went to the parishes all around the diocese to try and educate about what HIV was, how people would pick it up, how they could prevent it. We went into schools, we spoke in the parishes and all of the rest. I continued with that, continued working in the hospital, trying to keep everything safe, working. And at the end of 89, I had to come back. I came back to Ireland and I needed to be back here for 2 years. It was an opportunity and one I wouldn't have missed now in retrospect, because I got to go back to college for 2 years. I went to Milton and I did spirituality and pastoral counselling. And my dream was that I would go back to work with people living and trying to survive with HIV and the orphans and the people. I got to go back in 1992 to a different mission. We'd opened a new mission in Lilongwe, which is the capital city. And the bishop there then had asked if one of the sisters coming to the new mission would help to set up a diocesan AIDS program. They didn't have one. Lilongwe diocese, roughly the size of Ireland, with many parishes scattered all over the place. So we trained up some of the Malawian men and women, and we formed a team, went out into the parishes, and like we did in Mzuzu diocese, we tried to educate about HIV/AIDS. But at this time, still remembering there were no ARVs available, the local people in the parishes, they had a custom. They would have like Legion of Mary, Vincent de Paul, and other charitable groups who would normally visit people who were sick or infirm or elderly in their homes. But they had become very fearful of this because they didn't know if they could pick up HIV. And then we were seeing the problem that people who weren't being visited helped, which was very unlike Malawi. We were also seeing families, grandparents trying to look after orphans, children, because both parents had died. This continued. We worked with the teams around, and at the same time, we tried to train these volunteers how to keep themselves safe and how to liaise with the local hospitals, church hospitals or government hospitals, that the patients would get the care they needed. I continued with that until 1998. I came back again to Ireland, again for about 2 years. My mum had become terminally ill and I needed to be around. And in 2000, I got an opportunity again of going back to Malawi, this time back to Lilongwe. And I got an opportunity of starting a program that had become a dream during the time I was working on the AIDS program. I should have said that in 98, when I was leaving to come home, I was very fortunate. The diocesan AIDS program in Lilongwe, I was able to hand over to a very competent Malawian woman, Elizabeth, who continued the program. And over a period of time, ARVs became available. Took a little bit longer to get them into third world countries, but they became available. And by the time I went back in 2000, they were there and the programs were running and we were able to refer patients for treatment. So in 2000, I got to set up, with the blessing of MMM and a lot of encouragement, in the township about 5 kilometres from us, a women's development program. It was a burning desire of mine because I saw the plight of the women during the HIV/AIDS. Many of them became infected by their husbands because the husbands had been working in South Africa or Zimbabwe in the mines. They picked up infection, they came back and they spread it. And it spread by other means as well to the women in Malawi at the time, because the women would go dancing in the villages when the president moved around. And that was difficult. So we had all these women left, many of them sick themselves, still with HIV, trying to look after all these children and no support. So got the program started, got the women to tell their story, how life was, got them to dream how they would like life to be. Didn't promise to do everything for them. Said to them, come on, how can we do this together? How can we walk together? And maybe walk towards your dream. And we started up some crafts. We tied and dyed. We made soap. We made anything we could make, bags, crafted, crochet, knit, like our fancy fair. And the women were able to do that. They were able to make money from it, yes, and that was very important for them. But more important still, I feel, was they were able to sit together and they were able to talk. They were able to build trust. They were able to share their problems. Remember, Malawi had had a dictatorship up until roughly 1994. People were afraid to talk. People were afraid to trust each other. And we had to get across this. And you could sit, sometimes I would sit And I would be sitting on the floor, maybe crocheting with them. And you'd hear the topic come up of what was going on at home in the house or in the village. You didn't get into it, just left it be. And a couple of weeks later, you could maybe tell a Bible story or something. And the discussion would start and it would get really going. It was really good. So they were years of a lot of laughter and a lot of tears with the women. One of their big dreams, I should say, was at the very beginning, they wanted a clinic or a hospital in the township because they had to go 22 kilometres to the nearest hospital and very often go there with a child on fire with malaria, burning fever, and no medication to be found. They'd come back, and if I was around, to take them up to the local clinic and get something. But if I wasn't, or somebody else wasn't, the child might die. So the good thing that has happened since I left in 2006, I came back here to Ireland in 2006, was after a lot of negotiations, a clinic has been built. A clinic has been opened in Malawi, in Longway, in the township. Maternity clinic mainly. It's in collaboration with the parish and with the government, which makes it an ideal situation. And Sister Grace and the sisters are running it very, very successfully. And I had the joy last year of our Christmas fair funding that clinic. It was a new clinic at the time. And what that funding meant to the women was just unbelievable, what they could do with it. So since coming back, I have worked for 2-3 years at our nursing home in administration. And in about the end of 2010, I think it was, I was asked, would I consider going to help in the archive? And I thought, me in the archive? Could never have imagined it because, quite frankly, history was not my favourite subject at school. And I thought, oh no, Lord, here you go again. You can't do this to me. So I said, okay, when it was explained to me why. I have some computer skills, self-taught, every one of them. But anyway, I said, here we go, up we go. So I went up and got involved, and we have an archivist. We always have an archivist. It was a sister, now we've lay people, very, very capable. And it's really lovely to work with them, yes, to learn with them, but to see their enthusiasm as well. And so I'm up there, we're trying to preserve the documents, the artifacts, whatever we have, and we're trying to digitize because we want to make sure that we keep this heritage for our young sisters coming. And we know already the difference that will make because over the last few years, we've had our sisters come at times for 1 month to the mother house. And part of their time, they come up to the archive to us. And just to see their joy and their eyes and their mouths open at what we have up there. Because our documents, our materials go back to even before the congregation was founded. They go back to Mother Mary's family. And we are so fortunate to have all of that. And Mother Mary's letters, videos, audiovisual, and all the rest. So we're up there now trying our very best to digitize and to preserve documents and artifacts. And yes, I'm like a pig in mud. I'm absolutely enjoying it. I'm loving it. So the Lord's had the last laugh on me again. So that's where I'm at now. I think at the moment, like everybody maybe in the world, violence. The violence is terrible everywhere. Just look at our own country even. It's the same in Africa, it's the same everywhere. The poverty, and unfortunately, it's becoming worse, it's not getting better. And the divide between the haves and the have-nots. The rich seem to get richer and the poor get poorer. And just people being taken advantage of as I see it. Like I can remember when I went to Malawi first, we'd be on the road, we could buy coffee beans in sacks, we could buy groundnuts in sacks and pay the people properly for them. But now, since then, big companies have come in. The farmers sell them at little or nothing to these companies. They're not getting, Or worse still, others have come in from overseas, from other countries whom I will not name, but they've come in and they have bought land, small plots of land. It happened around the township where I was working, from the local people. The local people will sell it there and then in desperation because they need the money. They have to live today. They can't look for tomorrow. And that means come next year, the people have no land to plant their maize. They have no food. They now have no land. They have no income. And we're seeing this all the time, constantly. The needs are growing, unfortunately. And back to even the early days of MMM, we're always looking for more sisters. We're looking for more volunteers. But we're also looking for the funds to run these projects and to work with the local people. And I know from experience, the local people, if you work with them, they will, and they want to make a livelihood for themselves and their families. They're not asking for handouts. That's not what they're looking for. But sometimes that's what they're forced into. There's no other way. Like if you're hungry today and your kids are there crying, hungry, you're going to feed them for today. You can't even think about tomorrow. So I would say at the moment, violence, injustice, the rich getting richer and the poor poorer. And we just don't seem to be able to share what we have. And yet we know, like God created this earth and there's enough in it for everybody. And now, I know last year in Malawi, and I hear it again now this very week in Tanzania, we have big tsunamis of floods, whole villages. You watch a village being washed down, absolutely down the hill. People, houses, animals, everything gone, nothing found. You're dealing with that. So you have drought or you have floods. That means you have no food, you have no income. And this is the reality of people. And yet we can deny in places climate change and what we're doing to our world. It just baffles me. Well, when I can still remember sitting there last year with Sister Clara one night. Clara's one of our Malawian sisters. And she's showing me on her phone the video her sister had sent. And you could see the village next to theirs, being washed down the hill. And all I could remember was, a number of years ago, being actually physically there for Clara's final profession. And the impact of that when you think on it, you know. So maybe, I don't know, maybe we don't comprehend it when we're not there. But certainly if you're there, I've been there twice for famine in Malawi, when all I've seen was water and mud, people hungry, children with measles, and you're trying to get what you need in for them, and you're trying to get it, and you're begging for it. It's absolutely heartbreaking. I'd like to see peace, because it would make a difference, and lack of violence, and understanding and respect for people, acceptance of people. We're all different. Thank God we come with our own gifts and talents. Recognize them, get people to use them, work with them, and guaranteed you'll have a lot of laughter as well as a lot of satisfaction. I can still remember that with the women and those. And I can remember the many times I cried laughing with some of the things that happened. I would love to see more of that. And yes, very much healing. I would like to see people having the medical services, the care, but also like the homes, the food, the means of educating their children, because education is so, so important for these people. Not having to run away from their own countries. Like we as Irish, we know ourselves. Many of our people before us had to emigrate and leave. Many now are in a position of coming back. Ireland's one of the wealthiest countries. We'd love to see that happening in Africa and places. I just say, I'd love if we could just be fair with the rest of the world. That's really all I would say. It would make such a difference.
Thank you for listening to MMM Sister Stories. Tune in again for more episodes.